Welcome to Wadsworth History on Film, a program presented by the Wadsworth Area Historical Society and designed to record the oral history of Wadsworth for posterity. I'm Cesar Carino, your host, and today our guest is Jack Hall. Jack's real name is Jackson, but no one has ever called him Jackson. You wouldn't know whom they're talking about if someone say, "Jackson, would you come here?" Would you, Jack?
Now and then.
Now and then.
Now and then I
Who calls you Jack? Anybody call you Jack at all?
You mean Jackson?
Jackson?
Not too many people. It's usually somebody who doesn't know what's happened, or
right.
if they want to get real formal and
Call you Jackson.
be angry at me.
Well, we cannot get angry at our good friend Jackson Hall. Of course, that's a joke. No, we can't get angry with you. Jack, the reason that you're here is not that you're old enough to make any kind of contributions, because you're not very old, as you well know. We've been taking them from 80 to 97. However, we also have a whole series here on the mayors of Wadsworth. Now, the oldest living mayor, former mayor of Wadsworth, is our good friend Don Merriman. But Don refused. Actually, he declined the invitation to come to be interviewed because he's not feeling well enough, and we can understand that he's in his 90s, as you well know.
Yes, I do.
And then the only living survivor of any of the former mayors is Jack Hall. So that's why we're going to have you today. But in the meantime, in your 70 years of life, and you are 70 now, aren't you, Jack?
Yes, I am.
In your 70 years of life.
You remember, I'm the same age as your brother.
That's right.
Who's passed away.
I know exactly how old you are. So in the 70 years that you've been around, there have been a lot of things that you remember, and we're going to ask you to call upon those memories too. But we particularly want to talk about, your father and what he did. But before we do that, let's talk about Jack Hall. Now, right now, you're the uncontested. Isn't that a wonderful way to go through an election? An uncontested treasurer of the city of Wadsworth.
That's
and
right.
Jack, you have to know, if you don't know it to this day, you worked with a very good friend of mine for a long time. Who was that?
For about 8 years, I worked with your wife.
My wife, and she has nothing but admiration for you, and she enjoyed you immensely. When she left the auditor's office to take her present role in city government, she told me, one of the things I'm going to miss is Jack Hall. I guess you're pretty unpredictable, but you are, you keep
I'm there every day.
You're there every day, and you keep things going, and she enjoyed you immensely. So I think that you need to know that. Linda's not a very effusive person. She doesn't really emote, and about these kinds of things, but she feels them very strongly. So we have a good friend there with Linda. Now, Jack, I'd like to be able to think, of course, we're going to be bantering back and forth with Jack. I've known Jack for 50, 55 years, I don't know, many, many years, and we will be insulting each other continually throughout the entire program, because that's the way we have been talking to one another. But I find it very difficult that anyone would have married you. I mean, as cantankerous as you were, but someone did marry you, and she's a wonderful, wonderful lady and a beautiful woman. Whom did you marry, Jack?
I married a lady who was a college classmate of mine.
Can you remember her name, Jack?
Yeah, it was Arlene Rhodes at the time. When I'm
Rhodes. From
No, she's from Somerset, Pennsylvania.
Right. And we go to visit our daughter in the state of Delaware about once a month, and we always stop at Somerset. It's the exact halfway point to where my daughter lives, and I cannot remember the name Somerset because we always call it to Jack's town.
Well,
because that's where we know that you go there.
I've made several trips there, like about once a month for about 48 years.
Oh, mercy. You've been married that long.
Well, 47, and I was making a few after you got married. Before we got married.
I'm sure you did. Now, where were you and she in college together, Jack?
we both graduated from Wittenberg. She graduated in 1950, and I graduated in 1951.
Now, how did you happen to go to Wittenberg? Aren't you from the Trinity Church?
Yes.
And Wittenberg is not the Trinity Church.
Wittenberg is a Lutheran university, and Arlene got there through a teacher of hers who had gone to Wittenberg. She was not Lutheran either.
Oh, she wasn't?
Oh, she was Lutheran. I beg your pardon. She was Lutheran, and she just happened to have a teacher who went there and said she thought she'd like it, and so she went.
How did you get to Wittenberg?
I went to Wittenberg probably because Boyd Abrams went there, who is my cousin, and went down there, and it was one of the few places I could get in, I suppose,
Oh,
at the
come on,
time.
Jack. Jack, you said that magic word, cousin. Who else are you related to in Wadsworth? Or let's make it easy. To whom are you not related in Wadsworth?
Well, the Abrams family, my father, of course, was Jerry Hall, and he had
Jerry Hall. Harry
Jerry.
Jerry Hall.
And he had 2 sisters and 1 brother.
His sisters were?
His sisters were Fern and Leela.
And Fern married?
Clarence Abrams.
Okay, that's how you're married to the
Abrams family.
Abrams,
And
right.
that, the Abramses, there were 2 children, 2 boys, Grant and Boyd. Boyd was in the insurance business for a
Right.
long time, and Grant drove truck for my father and then worked for Brown Cleaners for many years.
That is correct. I know him well.
And 1 sister, the other sister was married, Liebert. What was Herb?
Herb Liebert.
Herb was a tailor at the time.
Right.
And Liebert's had Lois, who turned out to be Lois Miracle, Homer, and Virginia.
And Jane.
Yeah,
But Jane was from a different mother.
Jane was the same mother, different father.
Different father, okay.
No, different.
No, different mother, wasn't it?
Different mother.
Yeah, different mother.
Different mother, and so
Because Herb's first wife died.
My aunt died.
And
yeah.
that was Jerry Hall's wife, his sister.
Then Guy, my Uncle Guy was.
Uncle Guy Liebert?
No.
No, Uncle Guy.
Hall.
Hall, okay, Guy Hall.
Was married to a Mackey, I believe. I'm not sure about that one, but then they had Glenn and Kenny. And after Guy drowned when they lived in Galleon, my aunt, who was their mother, married another man, and then Hollis Smith was a prodigy of that marriage. And I don't know where Hollis is these days.
We know Hollis from way back when.
Yeah.
How are the Parmeleys related?
The Parmeleys? My sister married a Parmeley.
And tell us about who your sisters were.
I had only 1 sister.
Or your sister was, I'm sorry, yeah.
My sister was Irene.
Irene, and she married?
Don Parmeley,
Parmeley.
the oldest of the Parmeley boys.
And there are a million Parmeleys around.
There are quite a few. There was Don, Boyd, Kelly, and Lillian. And Lillian was Yelnick, and
Merle Jelinek wife.
Merle's wife.
And Merle Jelinek was a pharmacist at Brenny's for many years, but before that he was also a pharmacist in that place above where the American Legion is now, where they had...
You mean below, not above.
I know there was
Goldstein, I think.
there was a wholesale place above, and I thought they worked there, but maybe not.
No, I think Merle worked worked at the pharmacy desk.
Downstairs.
Downstairs.
All right, good. Now, I heard you say something about driving truck. What do you mean driving truck for my dad?
Well, my father originally was on the railroad, and he was yardmaster in Kent during World War I. After the war, he got, as yardmaster, he had a few labor problems over there and lost his job. So he came to Wadsworth and bought out Ernie Messner, who had a drayage or trucking business that time.
Which was probably what year?
About 1923.
Right, 1923. Your father came to Wadsworth in 1923.
Yeah,
then.
he had been born here, and he went to Kent on the as a railroad employee, and he was, and then came back after when this came available, and came back to Wadsworth about 1923.
Where was it located? Where was the drayage located?
Well, as near as I can tell you, it was located now where the Tony's Body Shop is in back of the Marathon Station.
But it was right on the corner of School Drive.
Well, not really. It was,
Farther back?
well, see, if you want to get a map out, you have to remember that there was an alley, or used to be an alley, that went past M&S Tool.
Right.
Okay. And
still does.
Back in there, there was
M&S Tool
also
was right, and that was Allen Auto Parts.
Allen Auto Parts. Allen, and you went back, when you went back in there, the milk company was back there.
And the Buick Garage.
No, that Buick Garage was on the other side.
On the other side.
Over towards the College Street side.
Main Street.
Or the Main Street. I'm confused already. And then there were houses on Lyman Street, or on Lyman, on South Lyman Street, and then the old Opera House was down on the corner. So eventually, after the trucking company got going well, my father ended up buying the Opera House from
Which was run by Joe Bender.
Joe Bender, and I can remember that was there and not being used in the early 1930s.
Well, what happened in 1937 then to the car barn? Or the truck barn?
In 1937, we had a little problem. I think it was on a Saturday night or a Sunday morning. The whole place burned down.
And why did it burn down? I mean, the fire department is only a
Across
couple
the
blocks
street?
away from, yeah. Why did it burn down? Because they went to the wrong place, didn't they?
Well, yeah.
They went to your dad's house, didn't they?
Somebody called the fire department and said, Hall's barn is on, the barn is on fire.
And what they meant was the truck barn.
Yeah, that was sometimes called, in excitement, they called that the barn. But my father also owned a farm north of town. Right about where the Masonic Temple is, there is a barn, was a barn. And they called to have, and the fire department went up there first. I don't think it would have really made any difference.
Well, no, not at all?
It was, no, because the fire had started and the building was totally involved, and with all the trucks in there with gasoline in the tanks. And the fire, we found out later, was being fed through an old broken gas line.
Oh, boy.
And the natural gas was also getting in there and helping it out.
It was a torch.
Yeah, and...
But they rebuilt it then, didn't they?
Yes, right
and
there.
And they rebuilt it with red cinder block.
Oh, no, those aren't cinder blocks. Those are
Tile?
Tile.
Red tile.
The clay tile.
I remember when they did that, and they used to have trucks that had solid wheels that did I don't know where they came from, but the trucks had solid wheels. Do you remember those?
No, I don't.
Yes, I remember that when they were rebuilding it, they had trucks with solid wheels.
Well, there were quite a few of those around.
Yeah, as a matter of fact, at one time, the Hall trucks were, the H.J. Hall trucks were quite prominent throughout the eastern part of the United States, were they not?
No.
They weren't?
No.
How far did they go?
We only went to Akron, Cleveland, Rittman, and Wadsworth.
Oh, just that far away?
Yes, and that was really what caused the demise of the trucking company in about 1970.
1970.
Yeah.
Now, I remember H.J. Hall, and I remember him very fondly because he was, first of all, he was the mayor of Wadsworth when I was born, or shortly after I was born. He became mayor, what, 1932?
No, I think it was 36. He was
36?
36 to 42.
Okay, so 36 to 42. And as far as I was concerned, Jerry Hall was everybody's mayor. And a cousin of mine came from Akron, and he said the mayor said this or the mayor said that. So you mean Jerry Hall? I said, no, it was Slusser. And I became violent because, no, Jerry Hall was the mayor. He was the mayor. Tommy Lucas was the policeman, and Jerry Hall was the mayor. And as far as I was concerned, that was it.
That fit the whole area.
The whole area.
Didn't make any difference, huh?
In 1941 or so, I was about 9 or 10 years old. I can remember this distinctly. It was a summer afternoon, and it was cloudy, and it was kind of muggy. And we lived in Silver Creek, where I live. Well, I don't live at the exact spot right now. I live 500 feet away from there, but we lived in a house which was in Silver Creek. A man was walking slowly from house to house and passing out literature. I didn't realize it was literature at that time. I do know it's literature now because I've done quite a bit of passing out of political literature in my lifetime, but that was a person whom I did not know. And he came up and said, is your mother or father home? This was mid of the afternoon. I said, well, my father is working. And my mother is up in the garden, and we had a huge garden, and she worked on it every single solitary day. She said, well, my name is Jerry Hall, and I'm running for the State Assembly, and would you give this to your mother and father and tell them to vote for me? And I said, yes, I will. Dutifully, I went right straight up to the garden and told my mother, said, a man came, his name is Jerry Hall, and he wants us to vote for him because he's going to run for the Congress of the United States or something, you know. She was very much impressed, and she said, was he a nice man? I said, yes, he was. I said, well, we'll vote for him then. Well, I'm sure that they did, because your father did win, not with our 2 votes, obviously, but your father did win that race, did he not?
Yes, he did.
He became then the representative from Medina County.
To the General Assembly, and that was
Assembly.
about 1942.
42.
After he.
I remember I was about 10 years old, and I was at home, and of course my mother was there, but she wasn't immediately available. And one of the reasons, as I say, we need to talk to you is we need to hear more about Jerry Hall, because I think that from our investigation, you are the only survivor of the oldest mayor.
Yeah,
Wadsworth.
okay.
So we would like to hear about Jerry Hall, a little bit about his personal life, his personality, what he believed in, what he did, and some of the things that happened while he was mayor, and all of those kinds of things. And then we're going to come back to you because you have an interesting story to tell as well.
My father was a local boy. He was born in Wadsworth.
Where was he born? Do you remember?
I'm not sure. It was either, I think it was the house that's on the corner of East Bergie and Main Street.
East Bergie and Main Street.
And it was would be the northeast corner. I think
The northeast corner.
I think that's
across from where Collins used to live.
Uh,
Bob Collins. They lived right in the corner. He had a typewriter repair there.
well, could be. I'm not sure. And but as near as I can recall, it was down in that area someplace that is where they lived, and that's where he was born.
Do you remember when he was born?
1887.
1887. He died in 1961, did he not? He
I
and
think it was 67, wasn't it?
I don't think so. I could be wrong.
Okay.
Well, but you would know when your father died.
We saw, well, I have a hard time remembering it because, wait a minute, did
I thought he died in
did I write
61.
that down?
I thought he died in 61 because he and
No, didn't write that down. The thing that I saw, yesterday I saw an old news banner that your wife had in her desk, and it was somewhere in the maybe late 60s or 70s, and it listed him as the publisher of the News Banner, and it said from certain date to 1967. So I figure that would have, he was.
Maybe so. I thought that he had died before that, but you know, I'm not sure that I know.
You know, I'm not sure that that's right, but it was in that era, and but that was he bought the trucking company and ran that, and it was something that he liked. He did movings. He hauled freight, and it really kind of started out from the drayage business, where you took stuff from the
Injector and match.
well, no, from the railroad
Oh, I see.
station, and you would take it up and deliver it. And then as it went along, they got into hauling paper from the Ohio box board up to the Ohio match, when they started to make paper matches, and did some work for the injector, not as much as we did the match, but then it just grew, and then started going to Cleveland, and then picking up dry freight and delivering it from the Cleveland hub to the Akron hub.
What's dry freight?
Well, that's the normal freight that you have, where you get a package and not gravel or something like that.
There are vocabulary words for every enterprise, and dry freight is one they hadn't heard of. Jack, let's kind of focus in on the person of H.J. Hall. I think that historians would like to know some of the things that he believed in, what he did, what kind of organizations he belonged to, who he was. He's a great father, I know that, and you have admiration for him. He worked from the south end of town to one of the nicest houses in Wadsworth in the north end of the town. And I think that he was one of the very first ones that had electronic garage door opener. Is that correct? Do you remember that?
I would guess, yeah.
And so, you know, he went from the soul to the crown in a very short period of time, a lifetime. And a lifetime is a short period of time to do that kind of thing. What was he like?
Very generous person.
Extremely generous person. Very nice person.
Very generous, and very, I don't know, it's kind of hard to talk about your father, and you never thought of him in that particular vein.
That's right.
To say that he did certain things, but he was very generous and very loving, and if he liked you, he would go to no end to
help you.
To
That's
help
right.
you out.
Now, he had some other relatives up there close to him where he had the farm,
Well, that was a cousin.
And his name was? Raymond Hall.
And he also has a Jack Hall.
That's right.
So to confuse everybody, both Jack Halls, who are related to each other, live on the same street.
Today.
He lives on one end of Good, and I live on the other.
End. And he has another daughter who is married to Pat Haith. His name is Elnora Hall.
Right.
And then he has other daughters as well, or other children as well. But Jack Hall, your cousin, used to be a patrolman.
No,
that was
another
Ray.
son. That was Raymond.
That was Ray Hall. That's right. Yeah, Ray Hall.
Jack was a truck driver and drove truck for 30 years, I suppose.
Did he? Did he drive for your dad?
No, did not drive for.
But Raymond Hall was a patrolman at one time.
Raymond Sr. was not a patrolman. Raymond Sr. was, he ran my dad's farm.
Farm, right, but I mean his son Raymond.
And then Raymond, his son, became a patrolman, and eventually moved to California.
Right. And there's another girl, and I can't think of her name right now.
Marjorie.
Marjorie Hall, yes.
Marjorie married a Dress.
Marjorie Dress, right.
Yeah. And
Beautiful girl. All of them were very good looking.
Yeah, Marjorie is still alive.
Marjorie would be about 75, 76 years old now, wouldn't she?
I think at least.
Yeah.
Maybe a little more.
Maybe a little older than that?
Yeah.
I thought perhaps in that era. Tell us again now about your dad, and then we want to go to another very valuable aspect of your parentage, and that's your mother, who always took a very low-key position in town. Is that correct?
She did.
Why
Yeah.
did she do that? She was a powerful woman, a wonderful woman.
Well, I think she was a little, I can't think of the word I want to say.
No, she wasn't shy, but she was retiring.
She was, she did not want to be in the
No
forefront.
limelight. Never. As a matter of fact.
She was very strong and told my father what to do at times, and I'm sure, but she was never one to be in the limelight.
Never was in the paper as if you remember that. Her name was never in the paper as being out there doing something and trying to get a name. What was her maiden name?
Snyder.
And was she a Wadsworth product?
No, she came from Johnson's Corner, Sherman, and still there. As far as I know, I'm having a little trouble figuring out what happened over there.
Well, there was a Snyder's Hill over there. Do you remember that?
Well, there was a Snyder Town over in
Snyder
Barberton
Town as well too.
but I don't know that fits in too much with my mom's family.
My guess would be I was in Sherman for 13 years when I first began teaching out of the military. I began my first civilian teaching job in Sherman and became principal there. And there are those who used to tell me about your mother's family, and they would all go to Snyder's Hill. And there was a great deal of speculation that could have been she, because at that time she was a very noted woman because of your father and so forth. I don't know whether that's true or not, but they used to say that. Mm-hmm. And that's why I wanted to have you bring that little point out. But going back to your mother, a stern, strong disciplinarian, is that correct?
Yes, she didn't put up with a lot.
And she had some sons, or she had a son who was shall we say, an energetic young man?
Well, most of the time. When I was younger, I really don't think I gave my parents a lot of problems.
Wouldn't dare.
Because I was too interested in athletics to do anything like study or anything like that.
Those kinds of things you didn't want to interfere with.
I didn't want to interfere with my good times.
We're going to get to the athletics here in a few minutes on you, but I'd like to take one more step with your mother. Tell us how she was the supporter of your father and what kinds of things she did that no one ever knew anything about.
Well, I'll tell you, I don't know a lot of the things that she did. I know that she worked at the trucking company. You have to remember, we lived above the truck garage until I was in the third grade, which would have been, how many years?
Probably 1939.
Yeah.
Or 1936, rather.
Yeah, about that time. And then we moved up to the north end of town where in a house that they renovated.
Well, they didn't. Not where your father died, though, on High Street.
No. It was there. That was where the house was, but it was not in that house.
Because they built that in '45, didn't they? 46.
No, about 47 or 8.
47 or 8 in that area, and that was after the war.
Yeah, it was after
Beautiful
the war
brick
that
home.
that one was built, and they just
Where did they live on the north or north of town after you left the truck garage?
With the same place.
But I mean,
The
who was-
house was there.
And who were your neighbors, left and right? Gilliams?
Well, the farmhouse was north.
And that's where Ray Hall lived.
Ray Hall lived, and then the only house south of there was Wingeyer's on the corner of West Good.
Right, that was Don Wingeyer.
That's Don
And-
was the son, Charlie was the father.
Father, okay, then Don then married a Nixon whose farm was across the street.
Across the street. Nixon's were,
Across the street.
yeah,
And Herb Nixon, I believe, was
yeah, that was Herb.
right across the street. Now, didn't the Gilliams used to live up in there too?
Gilliam? I can't think of any.
I thought that they lived right there, but I could be wrong.
Gillenwater?
No, Gilliams. Gilliam. He graduated with you in class, in
Gilligan.
Gilligan, that's right.
No, Kenny
Gilligan.
lived down on West Prospect, right at the bottom of the hill, where you go in where what is now that development that goes in there. There was a pond, right?
Right,
You know,
And the pond was troublesome.
well, it wasn't when it had water in it.
No.
Because I can remember ice skating there many years ago. And it was just a nice place to go.
Right. I was thinking of that because I think later on then he moved on High Street then, up there close to your parents. Gilligan.
Kenny moved down on Good,
Good.
on the corner of Good and Orchard, across from
Okay, and that area,
Valley View School.
right in that, and on the farm, actually. Well, it used to be the farm, wasn't it?
Well, yeah. The school brought about the development of that
That's right.
property. School decided they had to have a new one up there.
Now, your mother's family, do you have any relatives around here from your mother's family?
Yeah, there
Who
are
are
a few left. Well, there's a Bill Snyder that lives in the Falls. There's a cousin that still lives over in Sherman, and I can't remember what Biddy's name is. And Alberta Wheeler lives in Johnson's Corners area.
Yeah, Betty Snyder became, it'll come to me. I know her very well.
Yeah.
Yes, I know her very well. Betty Snyder, and she is a niece of your,
Of my mom.
yeah, she
Yeah.
had a son on October 2nd, 1963.
Because you were,
I was the principal of her other two children, and I remember that. And I can't think of the name right now, but she married, and then they moved down to Virginia or somewhere like that. But I'll think of her name here in a few minutes. But I know Betty Snyder very well, and she was an aunt.
Yeah.
That's where I got most of my information from regarding the Snyder Hill
Yeah.
and so forth. Because she used to say that Snyder Hill belonged to her grandparents and so forth.
well, that could well be, yeah.
The name will come to me in a couple of minutes. We all have the same disease, and it's a three-letter disease. It's called age, and it's hard to remember these things after a
Yeah,
while.
after
But it'll come
a
to
few
me when I'm not
years.
thinking of it. Jack, now, your father became mayor in 1936. What did he do before 1936 politically?
I don't think he had done much of anything.
Politically?
Politically. He did run for mayor, I think, in 1934 and got beat. And then he ran again in 36 and was elected. I can remember at times that I had to go with him and I had to sit through mayor's court or sit, if you remember the old city hall.
Oh, surely.
Where the mayor's office was in what was the chief of police's
Police's office, right.
and I would sit, if it were wrong, sometimes the door was open, sometimes it was closed, so that I sat out in the secretary's office, and could hear Mayor's Court going on, and he always said it was hard to find your friends when they came in for those little indiscretions that they
That's true. That's very, very true.
had done.
We had the mayor's court. That, of course, we don't have that anymore, but we had the mayor's court at that time. What major things happened during your father's administration in the 6 years that he was in?
Well, I think the building of the Grandview Pool.
That was one of them in
Was one of them.
1941.
I think one of the things that they did is in early on in his reign or time as mayor, I think that's, the city did own their own power distribution system then. And I think through all the times that we've had it, that was probably one of the times when Ohio Edison was putting more and more pressure on to buy it. And I can remember that they really wanted to get the city out of the business. And
Now, you've been in city government for what 10 years?
well, I'm on my ninth right
Your
now.
ninth right now, and you'll finish that. And then you'll be the treasurer again for 2 years because you're not being challenged by anybody else. What do you see in city government now which was so different from what you saw when your father was there as the mayor?
The decisions that were made were not nearly so complex.
Far from it, wasn't it? It was a simple time.
Yeah, and I know one thing my father wanted to do is they built and while he was mayor, they built the old, or the first new city hall.
Right.
Which was then torn down for the new one this couple years ago. When I can remember him saying, I want to buy, he was a visionary type person. He said, the city needs to buy all that property up to the corner.
Big W Market.
Where the Big W Market was up to
Martha
what,
Straightman's.
Prospect, no, Boyer Street.
Boyer Street.
From the old building up to Boyer Street. He said, we should have that. But he couldn't convince the council to buy it because the Straightons lived there, I think.
Marguerite Straighton.
Marguerite and her husband lived there, and they weren't amenable to selling that.
Well, they finally took the Marguerite Straighton property by eminent domain, didn't they?
No, I don't think so, because,
didn't they?
well, they might have, but the other market where Leib moved in and that frontage and all of that would have been, but he wanted to buy that at that time. And
That would have been a good thing to do at those times. You probably could have got it for a few $1,000, but it cost a few more $1,000 beyond that now, wasn't it?
because he said, we're going to have to expand this building and do things that we don't normally want to do, but
When your father ran in 1936, who ran against him? Do you remember?
no, don't. It could have been Norm Stein.
Well, Norm Stein ran later on, though.
Well, I don't remember who it was in 1936.
I think that Norm Stein then followed your
And
father.
Stein ran 2 or 3 times.
Oh, did he?
Yeah. And my father beat him
Right.
a couple
Now,
times.
I know the answer to this question, and you know the answer to this question, but someone 50 years from now may not know. Your father was what party?
He was a Republican,
Republican. Was he always a Republican?
as far as I know.
Yes. And you were a Republican as well?
Yes, I am.
You've always been. Are there any members of the family who are not Republican that you know of?
Yeah, I think so, but I don't know.
You don't know who they are.
They haven't
They haven't admitted
come
it.
forward.
They haven't admitted it yet. They're kind of closet Democrats or
Yeah.
something like that. And the other reason I bring that out is not for any political reasons, but so that we can have historically for posterity, the fact that someone might come by and say, well, the halls were Democrats because one hall was Democrat. And we now can identify the
Yeah.
fact that most of the halls were Republicans, and
Yeah.
maybe there might have been one or two Democrats. When you were growing up and you were in school in 1936, you were in the third grade. Is that correct?
Well, that's about right, yeah.
You went at that time to probably Franklin School or Lincoln, or the Central School?
Central.
Central, okay.
I used to walk out of the back
Door and go into
door of my house and
and go directly to Central.
go right across the alley,
Alley, go
the
to
school
school.
alley to school.
Who was your third grade teacher when you were there? Do you remember?
No, don't.
How about your second and
Oh,
first?
wait a minute. No. Lula Nolf, I think,
Lula
was
Nolf.
was my second grade teacher.
You would remember that, would you not?
I did remember that one.
Lula Nolf was a strict school mom if
Oh,
there ever
yes.
was one.
Yeah.
She was a powerful woman and a good teacher. The reason I'm asking this question is you were probably an anomaly within your own school because your father was the mayor. How did the kids treat you?
I don't think I got any better treatment than, maybe a little. I can remember there was a group of us one Halloween who went through the back alley from that's where side of Wyrus, where Wyrus is now.
That would be off Main
Domino's.
Street.
Yeah, there's an alley goes back in there, and there were people who lived back in there, and there was a car there. And as we went through the alley, I guess somebody bent a car's antenna.
Somebody might have done that, huh?
They were doing that even then. And of course, being one of the, maybe one of the first ones that went through the alley, I did not know this. And when we came out a little later, Ed Transu said,
Whom you did not cross.
said, Jack, did you see anybody bend the antenna on a car in the alley? And I truthfully said that I did not. But I found out later that somebody had. But at the time, I did not know that they had.
Ed Transu, we've talked about him before in this program. What do you remember about Ed Transu? A policeman.
Yes. Stern
Oh,
man,
stern.
but
Strong and
very
powerful.
fair.
Fair, very fair. But he wouldn't have cared if you would have been the president's son. If you would have been that, he would have held you by the seat of the pants.
He asked, he took my word for it that I did not know that.
Did not see it.
He may have questioned somebody else a little more if it had happened, but
Now, your father was mayor when the war broke out.
Mm-hmm.
Do you remember anything that your father had to do for the war effort as a mayor at that time? Remember, this is the first war since the First World War. And it wasn't too many years later, it was only 22 years later that the war had ended, 21, 22, 23 years later.
I can't remember what.
What about the fact that he had to appoint air raid personnel?
Yeah, I think he did. I don't really remember.
And what about having to make air raid shelters? Do you remember that?
I don't remember making any shelters.
But did we have to identify places where shelters would be?
No.
No?
No.
I thought that some of the places like City Hall and the Masonic Temple and some of the schools.
I think that was later
Later on?
when we got into the Cold War with Russia, because that we started doing shelters in public buildings.
Do you remember your air raid warden?
Certainly not.
You don't remember him? And wasn't he an air raid warden himself?
I can't answer that. I don't know that he was. He was He may have been there, but I really don't remember that
No.
that at all.
The fire department was beginning to take a great deal of stature, because prior to that, it was, well, had nothing to do with Wadsworth. It's just the fact that fire engines and things of this nature just weren't that popular. They might have had one or two or something like this, but in 1937, they got an American La France. Do you remember that one?
I remember what it looked like, yes.
Did your father drive that down the
I think he was one of the designated drivers.
Because he was a fireman too.
Yeah, he was a fireman.
And some of your relatives were fire people too.
Yeah.
Parmalee?
No, Parmalee
No, not
was
Parmalee, but
Kenny Hall.
Kenny Hall, yeah.
Kenny
and then
Hall
there was the
was a
big,
fire.
heavy set fellow. What's his name?
Crumrine.
Crumrine, yeah.
Crumrine worked for my father in the office, and Bob was a fireman.
Now, do you remember anything about a fire truck going north on High Street and taking the curve a little too fast up there, about
No.
1942 or 3?
No, don't.
Had a tanker, and they didn't have baffles in it. And I think it tipped over, but not positive. And from my understanding and recollection, your father then ordered all tankers to have baffles in them. I could be wrong on that, but I think that was the last year that your dad was in office.
I don't remember that one. I don't remember that incident as such.
Right. Do you remember who countered your father in the second election that he ran for mayor? He was the mayor for what, 3 terms, wasn't he? Do you remember who countered
No,
him in 1938?
I do not.
And how about 1940?
No, I didn't pay any attention to
Of course, those things, yeah. After all, they were just only Democrats, right?
Yeah. And Wadsworth was a pretty Republican place at that.
65% Republican at that time. And it was very difficult for a Democrat to win. But we did have a Democratic mayor following that. I think that's the one that Norm Stein was Democrat, wasn't he?
Yes, he was.
And then
Then Stein, and then Barris Burbeck, I think.
Burbeck was Republican.
And
When did Don Merriman come in there? He was a Democrat. So it kind of went back and forth a little bit. But they're all good people. Every single one of them, they're all good people. I'd like to hear a little bit more about, we have a few minutes left, and we know so much about your father, and we want to know so much about your father, but we have to know a little bit about you. Let's go back to 1945. Do you remember 1945?
vaguely.
What happened in 1945 with you?
Well, I joined in 1945.
On June 1st, what did you do in 1945?
June 1st?
Right.
I wasn't even here June 1st.
You graduated from high school on June 1st, 1945.
But I wasn't here.
You weren't here. That's why I wanted to hear that. You were not here. What happened? What was very significant about that?
I was one of those lucky or unlucky ones who turned 18 during the school year.
And what happened, Jack?
I enlisted in the United States Coast Guard.
And who else enlisted with you?
Ed Wilson.
Ed Wilson and you enlisted in the United States Coast Guard. You did not go to your graduation. Is that correct?
No, I didn't get back from my graduation. I think I was probably aboard a ship going overseas to pick up troops to bring home.
And it didn't make any difference whether you were a senior in high school, whether you had a senior prom coming up, whether you had graduation coming up. You went because there was a war on.
Right.
The Second World War.
When I went, there was a war on. I really had the best of both worlds. I joined the Coast Guard in February of 1945. The war ended in Germany in May of 1945.
In Germany?
In Germany. And we were taking, and I went aboard a troop transport ship in June 1945. And then we made several trips across the Atlantic to France to Italy, and we always brought 5,000-6,000 people back from on this troop transport. And we were scheduled to go into dry dock to have it fixed up, and the war ended in Japan.
In August.
And so when they said, well, we won't put you into dry dock yet, they were going to send us to the Pacific. So when we went in a couple trips later after bringing some more troops back, they took all the guns off this troop transport and sent us back. So we went back out then and went to the Pacific and brought troops back out of the Pacific. Mm-hmm. And on the trip over to the Pacific, we left Boston, went to Norfolk, Virginia, picked up a load of Marines, picked up 2 friends from Wadsworth.
And who were they?
Paul Gordon and Warren Gardner.
Okay, Warren Gardner was on Stratford Avenue, Paul Gardner was from River Styx.
Mm-hmm. And took them to a base, an occupation base in Tientsin, China.
In China. Here's this one Wadsworth boy picking up 2 other Wadsworth boys going and taking them to China.
Yeah, and they were both in the Marine Corps, and I don't know what they were.
Very powerful kids, both of them very strong, very well built. I remember both of them exceedingly well. And of course, you remember the fact that you and Ed left before graduation?
Yeah, I left, and then Ed came later. Ed had to have surgery, so that he couldn't go at the same time I did.
Right. The years following, you were then, I think that you were released from the service in about 47 or 8, 47? What time?
No, I got out in 1946.
46, okay, 1946. And then what did you do?
Then I took a year off. It was, when you get out in June, I hadn't really made up my mind where I was going to go to school. And so I took that next year and worked
at the trucking
company. I was a mechanic.
A mechanic at the trucking company?
Yes.
And your dad expected you to do as much as anybody else? And if you didn't, you heard about it?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Didn't make any difference whether you were his son or not. No. And you had some chief mechanics there. Crumrine was one of them, wasn't he?
No.
No, he was a driver.
No, Crumrine was working in the office.
Oh, in the office. Who was wait a second.
Lee Alexander.
Lee Alexander, but there's another one too.
Kenny Razor.
Kenny Razor, and one more.
Ben Upson.
Ben Upson, yes. They were all fine mechanics. Mm-hmm. And they didn't care whether you were the boss's son or not.
No, I got just as greasy as everybody else.
You surely did. And you were a good mechanic too. Yeah. They liked you. Yeah. Jack, you decided to go to college. And after you made that decision, you started at Wittenberg, but you were not going to go into what you finally ended up to. Is that right? Why did you originally intend to go to college? To study what?
I went in for business.
That's always what you wanted to do?
Yeah.
I thought that you had another thought in mind at Wittenberg.
No.
Just business?
Yeah.
And you got a degree in what, in accounting or in business administration?
I got a degree in economics.
In economics, okay. Which is business in the matter of speaking.
Yeah.
Yeah, but you got the degree in economics, you came out of there, and then you did not become a city treasurer right away. What did you do for about 30 years or so?
For 25 years,
25.
I worked at the trucking company as sort of a salesman, sort of a claims adjuster. Then, excuse me, when then the man who was handling the books and
who was
the man who
the man who was handling
the books decided he was going to leave and go to another job, and I ended up taking over the books and the check writing and all the other things
for the trucking company.
For the trucking company.
H.J. Hall Trucking.
Yep.
And how long were you there?
25 years.
And then what did you do?
Oh, then when we sold it out, we ended up leaving it sit for a few years till we found something that we could put in it. And then the city decided they wanted to build that parking area in back of the businesses there in the southeast quadrant, and that took most of the building. So we kept part of it. Finally found that we could put the racquetball courts in there and the fitness center, which is now Tony's, and really that's what we put together there. And that was there for about I was there for 8 years. And
It's called Tony's Body Shop.
mm-hmm.
What's the significance of that title?
I don't know.
Well,
Tony Perry
Tony Perry. And
bought
Tony
it
Perry was
from
in,
us.
was in
and
the automotive business all these years, and
Well-
he had a body shop at Tony Perry Chevrolet, right?
Yeah,
And
but
then-
I'm not sure whether Tony was still it was very close of Tony selling the
Tony Perry
dealership
Chevrolet, right.
to
Serpentini.
Serpentini.
But now, I thought the name came from the fact there was kind of a play on words, Tony's Body Shop, you know,
Yeah,
for where it was.
yeah.
Wasn't that
It was a little bit of play on.
a little bit of a play on words? Now, who owns that today?
I think Tony still owns it today.
And how did you become involved with it, Jack?
Well, I owned the building with my sister, and we put it together and decided that maybe we could put racquetball courts in there and make some money with it. And as it turned out, we were about 5 years late getting that sort of thing going, and it just didn't do too well. So that we ended up having to sell it to Tony.
So you sold it to Tony. And is it flourishing today yet or not?
It's still there.
It's still there.
I wouldn't say that it's flourishing, but I think they have changed the focus of the place from racquetball, which it was when we had it, to the body shop. And
What did you call it when it was
it was Hall's Racquetball.
Hall's Racket?
And Bill Thompson, we leased the fitness center part out to Bill Thompson, who was a strength coach at the high school.
At the high
time.
school, right. Now, right after that, you did something that probably had been in the back of your mind since the time you were a little kid, your father was mayor and so forth. What did you do?
Really, right after that, I went into real estate business and selling real estate for a while. But then Bill Gross decided that he wanted to retire from
As
the treasurer's job.
office.
And Bob Daniels, who was mayor at the time, said, "Will you be the treasurer?" I said, "Yeah." I said, "I would." He said, "Well, you've got to run next year." So I said, "That's okay, I'll try that." So
Did
that
you have
was-
any surprises about the way that you had to run and the way that your father ran?
I don't remember much about my father running. Yeah, I think it was pretty much the same. You get out on your horse and you walk around and you pass out cards and you talk to people and you tell them you want the job, and that's the best way to get elected.
And you won.
Yeah, you won.
Then how many times did you run after that?
Well, I was in for a year. This is 1, 2, and this is the
Third time.
third one.
And you were opposed the other 2 times, right?
Yeah.
And did you win?
Yes, I did.
So you've been in there for 9 years, and you have 2 more years to go because you were unopposed this time.
No, 4.
4 more years
It's
to
a
go. That's right.
4-year
That's right.
term.
That's right. Exactly. 4 more years to go. So this is a 4-year term, and you're scot-free. By the time that you're out of there, you'll be 74 years old, 75 maybe, or so.
Yeah.
And by that time, you might even be permitted to retire. We might let you retire, Jack.
Well, I might run for mayor then.
That will be great. You can do that as well. Jack, we're at the end of the hour. We have been so blessed with the memories that you have, not only of your father and your mother and the trucking company and the body shop and the Tony's Body Shop and the Hall's Racquetball Club, and the fact that you were a merchant, a Coast Guard person during the time that you could have been graduating from high school. You didn't go through your high school graduation because you were serving your country, and now you're serving your community as a treasure. And we're just delighted to have you and to have had your whole family as part of Wadsworth history. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Caesar.